So welcome to the other side of the tank, the gunner driver's position. It has just been described to me as a very easy tank to drive, but not an easy tank to drive well. I was reading one of the British Army reports described the ride as akin to that provided by a camel because of the pitching effect caused by the short track base. Now, what he doesn't say is where he found a camel to make the comparison to, but what can you do? Steering is done by use of the T-bar. You would almost be familiar with it from the M1 Abrams, except instead of the twist being the throttle, that actually controls the elevation. The accelerator, or foot throttle, is located down by your right foot where you would expect, and the brake is large on the left. Again, this is not a vehicle for short personnel. I do think I would be able to drive it, but I would not want to drive it for long. In event that this primary steering system fails, he does have two alternate control handles, and that's a far more traditional steering system with the clutch brake. Now, I say clutch brake, and that is actually one of the techniques for getting this thing to turn quickly. Now, if you're sitting still and you simply traverse the handles, the vehicle will take about 12 seconds to do a 180-degree rotation, which is not bad, but it's not great. However, if you're driving along at a fair clip and then you pull hard with the controls, you're going to do what's called the clutch brake steer. And this will basically get you from pointing one way to pointing the other way in 2 seconds flat. And if combined with, say, the Commander's stabilized seek system, you can actually put onto targets off to your side probably faster than a conventionally turreted tank. Because, I mean, you simply take the second to swing over to the right and then you're on to the delay phase, as opposed to traversing the turret all the way. Of course, fire on the move is not really an option on this. There is something in the manual about 200 yards, but no. Maximum elevation and depression are 11 degrees in practice. You'll sometimes see 12 and 10, but it's because the gun is mounted 1 degree offset from the hull. Other controls to his front. Now, of course, in addition to driving, and he does have the rev counter and speedometer in front of him, the primary sight. He has the Unity optic, which of course is also used primarily for driving. He has one additional optic for driving, Unity, off on the left-hand side. For the right, he is at the mercy of the Commander's guidance. His field of vision forwards is actually pretty good because you have that long sloping front, so the amount of dead ground is actually very small. And if he really wants to see close, he can even nose the tank forward, and then he'll see right up close to the tank. It's much better visibility than pretty much any other tank out there. Inside the primary sight, there are two circles. Each circle represents the field of vision for the different range scales. So your basic sight is a by 6. Then you can go to a by 10, and then even a by 18, which is pretty reasonable. The primary sight, you can adjust the interocular distance, and of course focus for the two. The reticle inside is complex, and has been unfortunately disparaged because of it. It consists of armor-piercing scale every 200 yards after, or meters, I'm sorry, every 200 meters after 600 meters, as far as about 2200. The HE scale goes every 100 yards up to 4,000 meters, and you also have the machine gun scale. Then you have additional points of aim depending on whether or not you expect a 5 km/h crosswind or a 10 km/h crosswind. There is no particular cant correction in the vehicle. The vehicle will not tilt side to side if you're firing on the side of a hill. Instead, in theory, what you're supposed to do is look at an inclinometer, and it will tell you how much you are keeling over to one side, and you aim off accordingly. In actuality, especially if you're firing AP, just aim center mass. The tilt is not likely to be sufficient to cause any significant change. And if you're firing high explosive, well, you just fire again. The T-bar controls also control, obviously, the gunnery system, the various knobs and switches, a switchology as you might call it, cannon and machine gun selector, safe and fire, elevation, lock or free, and then you have the controls for loading the two different magazines, a ready light when you're loaded, button on the right for the laser rangefinder, button on the left is fire. Finishing off in the front area here, we have bore sight controls for vertical and horizontal adjustment. There are filters, so if you have sun glare or something like that, you can deal with that problem. Also allows better contrast maybe in certain lighting conditions. Now, the problem with having only the one primary sight is that it's actually very difficult to determine whether or not your gun tube is clear of the berm that you're hiding behind. On, let's say, an M1, there's a coaxial telescope right down by the gun. If you see dirt, you know you can't fire. If you see sky, you know you're probably good. So short of practice, or when you're in a position getting out of the tank, dropping the breech and looking through the tube, you have no way of knowing for sure. A couple of other little neat tricks about the sight. One is that when you fire, there is a shutter. For about a half a second, the sight will close off and blank out, and this will stop the gunner being blinded, especially if he's shooting at night. Another interesting feature is you can attach a gun camera. You simply mount it underneath, and you can record the engagement as you're going, either for if you want it for kills, or more likely just for gunnery training is probably the best use. Today, of course, you have the full camera sight, which is remotely transmitted. The loading cycle is about 3 seconds, a little bit less, but in practice your engagement times are probably going to be a little bit longer, partially because of obscuration and partially also simply because the tank is rocking backwards and forwards. But if you maintain pressure on the trigger as the tank is firing, it's basically a follow-through, what will happen is the suspension will figure out where it is compared to where it was, and it will resettle on the last point of lay. Now, one of the nice things about the autoloader is that all the ammunition is immediately accessible. So you fire your engagement of, let's say, 10 rounds. If you're on a Centurion or something like that, you're now scrambling around trying to find the other ammunition scattered around the tank and restowing the loader's ready rack with it. With the S-Tank, the autoloader, every round is available until you run out of ammunition completely. The gun itself is a 62 caliber length modification based off of the British L7 rifle, and this added a little bit more velocity, a little bit more accuracy, a little bit more punch. The Swedes did build their own ammunition. Transmissions. The early model vehicles had a two-stage transmission. You had a low gear for rough terrain and you had a high gear for easy going. In order to change from one to the other, you had to come to a complete halt, which is a little bit of a nuisance. By the C model, they've now changed it. It is very simply forwards, neutral, and back. Just to the rear of it, we have an inclinometer. It shows you whether or not you are actually level. And as you can see, we aren't. We found a stowage position for one of the universal tools. And if you look straight down, there is an escape hatch for the driver, about the size of a moderately large New York pizza. So that's pretty much how you drive it, in theory. Let's take it for a spin.
And push start. Well, that seems simple enough. That was very easy. Okay, the transmission light is on. There we go. A little bit of suspension. Okay, so I'm not doing this slowly. I mean, I can do this very slowly. Look at that small amount of elevation change. It is actually lifting. It's very difficult to see, very hard to perceive. So we can nudge it all the way down. So it looks like elevation depends on where I leave the lever. So if I bring it back up to horizontal, the elevation of the tank will go horizontal as well. This is disconcerting. This feels very strange. Okay, so that's as far down as we go. And I can see maybe 3 meters in front of the tank, so that's actually amazing. Let's bring it back up a little bit. You hear the hydraulics pumping away as it moves the fuel from the rear of the tank to the front arms. And keep going all the way. I'm not going this as fast as it can go. And now we're at maximum elevation. Well, okay, that took a second to catch up with hydraulics. And I now get a good shot at the drone that's flying above us. Okay, so we'll go back to horizontal again. We have figured out how to keep the tank more or less aiming in the right direction. Okay, so we have another switch for the gas turbine. Alright, is this like the Abrams where I have to press and hold? Okay, so I haven't started the turbine engine since my Abrams days back about 2008. I'm waiting to hear the whine. That is a familiar whine I have not heard in a while. Oh, I'm a happy man now. Just started with the turbine engine. Okay, it is pressed. Okay, put it forward. Oh, that was easy. Stop. Okay, so I have to do that first. I have now stalled my first tank. So what happened there, because you can't of course hear the intercom system, is I failed to apply sufficient accelerator while we were in gear to affect the turn. And I was a little bit reluctant because as soon as I let go of the brake, the tank started to go forwards. So lesson learned. It'll take me a go or two, I'm sure. Hopefully I don't break the tank with all the starting and stopping. Visibility to my right is okay, it's not bad. I can see to the rear, which most tank drivers cannot. And then of course you have the rear driver, so I guess one of the difficulties is that I'm responsible not only for driving but also for spotting targets to my left. It's a shame they didn't give the back driver another periscope to see sideways. So yeah, one of the things I'm noticing is that the visibility of the rear, I'm a driver that can see from the rear, but the crew duties are an issue because the commander, okay, yeah, he's got a 360-degree eagle at him, and he's busy though, he's looking for threats to the right and in theory to the left. The driver is driving, but he is also responsible for the left. So it could get a little bit overload. Let's go back into gear. Moran kicks in again. I'll hold on this. It's actually not uncomfortable ride. So hopefully that it's a little different from the Abrams when you're driving in the middle and you know exactly where the middle is. So now the pressing on that's a little here. So now if you want to look at the side of the tank, I'm now climbing up the hill and in the press angle. Well, now here's some up though, so I can't now shoot at a target below me. But I guess that's fixed by going forward. Reverse the meter. Okay. Behind us. neutral.
Well, that was it. The S-Tank. First ever clutch brake turn. That's a whole lot of stuff to take off. I'm just used to pulling off the CVC and that's it. I did manage to stall it a couple of times. The turbine is a little bit sensitive to pulling maneuvers if you don't use the accelerator. Something I'm not really used to from the M1, but hey, I got 1500 horse in the M1, so I guess there is that. So that was it, the famous S-Tank. Now you may have heard in World of Tanks we're putting this in as a tank destroyer. That's purely for gameplay purposes. This was a tank. It was designed as a tank, it was issued as a tank and used as a tank, expected to perform all the normal tank roles. In the 1970s, the British took 10 of them, took them for a 6-month trial in Germany, and overall it turned out to be a bit of a wash. Certainly the S-Tank had certain advantages, but especially by the time you start comparing with Chieftain, which had a newer turret traverse motors, had a stabilization system that was actually pretty reasonable, you start to see that the advantages of S-Tank are starting to become outweighed by the disadvantages. Come 2000, the writing was on the wall. The S-Tank, they tried to make the STRV 103D, didn't work out. The disadvantages at this point were just too pronounced, and it had been replaced in service by the STRV 121 and 122, known to the rest of the world as Leopard 2. Of the 290 tanks that were built up until 1971, in the end, 29 C models were saved. The Swedes basically said, hey, who wants one? In addition to the Series 0 prototypes, 8 of them, and 2 S1 and S2. They've been scattered around the world, from Fort Benning to Kubinka, from Bovington to Puckapunyal. So if you want to see an S-Tank in person, there's probably one within reasonable distance of you. Hope you enjoyed the tour. I know I did. I'll see you on the next one.